Welcome, fans, to a special podcast tonight with none other than the King of Connecticut and myself, Jack Kilby, to discuss the news that has enraptured the combat sports world. That is the merger between the UFC and WWE, and some of Mr. Granahan's insights into the topic that are quite unique and from a real insider's perspective. Matt, how are you doing tonight?
Great, Jack. How are you?
Not bad at all, sir. Wanted to start with. It seems to me that a logical place to start your discussion is around the fact that your rough and tumble book with Mr. Paulson really educated a lot of the fans to the historical roots between MMA and pro wrestling, and what a milestone work that was and is.
Thank you, Jack. Yeah, I actually have a copy of it right here, and fans can get a signed copy of it directly from me on my social media, and either Matthew J. Granahan or King.of.Connecticut. Yes, and this merger is just an indelible affirmation of what we already knew and seek to educate the fans on when we wrote this book. Started writing this book 16 years ago, and it was released, I believe, 14 years ago, coming right up on the 14th anniversary. And that is that the mixed martial arts, and what was previously called No Holds Barred, evolved out of professional wrestling, and that they are both roots of the same tree and emanate from the same roots. And there's a lot of ignorance among the fans on both sides. And if you want to educate yourself, again, buy the book.
A lot of folks that follow old school shooters and some of the other commentaries that you've done on the Hannibal TV are aware that you were a prime marketing consultant and created synergies between Spike TV and Bellator MMA. Would you expand on that a little bit for some people that are perhaps seeing this for the first time?
Sure. The goal was to keep the UFC fan base, because Spike TV had been developed by UFC. The two were synonymous with one another. And during my tenure there as prime marketing consultant, when Bellator came on Spike TV and UFC moved to Fox, we wanted to maintain that fan base. And one of the ways that we did that was in signing guys like the late, great Stephan Bonner, who was a great client and friend of mine. Folks should go back and listen to all my tributes to Stephan. And Stephan really took the bull by the horns there. My original goal was to get the Forrest Griffin Stephan Bonner fight again. And we couldn't do that because Forrest was under contract. That was the fight that had taken MMA mainstream in 2005. And you talk about a promo, man. I mean, I just want to say to the fans, they need to understand that the roots of professional wrestling and mixed martial arts are vaudevillian. They come out of vaudeville. They come out of the carnivals. They come out of the circuses. And man, Stephan Bonner, the way he executed that promo when we had Sean McCulley under the mask, Tito's old trainer, and the way that he worked Tito was masterful. And it was the only time that Bellator ever beat the UFC head-to-head in the ratings. UFC that then on Fox, and Bellator on Spike, UFC's old home. And that's the roots, is calling people into the building, the carnies, the carnival barker, the take on all comers. That's where professional wrestling and mixed martial arts come from. And I brought that to every promotion that I worked for over the years. And I definitely brought that to Bellator. And when I co-authored the marketing plan for Bellator, that they're still using, that tenet never left. And that's the original tenet of it's entertainment. And man, what a monumental thing with UFC and WWE merging here. And like I say, man, what an indelible affirmation of what we wrote in Rough and Tumble. But beyond that, it's very similar to what's gone on in years past in Japan with pro wrestling and MMA in the early days of mixed martial arts, even pre-UFC with Shuto and rings and Pancras. This opens up so many opportunities for marketing for both brands. It's so incredibly exciting, brother.
And for the fans that are asking where they can buy your book, we'll post a link in the description of this video. But did you want to shout that out one time, because we've got
like I said, as I said, the best place to get it now is directly from me. You can get signed copies. I have boxes of books. The book is 14 plus years old, but I still have copies, and you can message me directly on my social media, again on Matthew J. Granahan on my Facebook. Send me a DM or DM me on king.of.connecticut spelled out on Instagram.
You mentioned the late great Stephan Bonnar as one of the individuals that from the MMA community that you were instrumental in crossing over from the octagon to the squared circle. And I'd be remiss if I didn't also mention Phil Baroni in that list as well. How did you accomplish that process? And can you give the fans, a lot of people talk about MMA guys going to pro wrestling and gals, Ronda, et cetera, but could you break it down for the fans from a firsthand perspective, what that entailed for you?
Sure. And the first way that I want to explain it is and I believe this is what Art Davies said in our interview, the creator and founder of the UFC, is that the UFC is the most successful professional wrestling organization in the world right now. And getting guys like Stephan Bonnar and Phil Baroni into pro wrestling was such a natural for me, because that's how I got into pro wrestling myself, was from the shoot world. I've told that story to you in the past, and taking guys off of the mat, the amateur wrestling mat, and out of the cage and into the squared circle and wrestling. I told a story recently on Old School Shooters when we had John Paz, about Stephan Bonnar and his first pro wrestling match that I booked him against with Sho Tanaka, who had just finished a series. He was married to Kazushi Sakuraba in Japan, not in a homosexual way, but married, as they call it in professional wrestling, where they had done a series of matches together. And when Matt Riddle got a case of the pussyitis a few hours before the show, and Bonnar wrestled Sho, they spoke in the language of wrestling. And that is really, once again, the two sports are really one, and they came from the same place. And folks really need to read the book. It'll take it from the point of the late 1900s all the way to today, or the late 1800s rather, all the way to today, or to 14 years ago, and how the sports were created, and how the roots of the same tree, and how mixed martial arts, again, not to be redundant, but how it came out of professional wrestling. And those two guys, Stephan Bonnar, RIP, and the New York Badass Phil Baroni, they were absolute naturals in the squared circle. And like I said, going back to Bellator, the way that Bonnar executed that promo was classic vaudevillian, classic carny. And I use carny not as a pejorative. and folks who use it as a pejorative are ignorant fools. And there's a lot of fans that are ignorant fools in the world of professional wrestling, just like mixed martial arts. They need to read Rough and Tumble and educate themselves.
Yeah, not only fans, but some in the pro wrestling industry that use the term carny as a pejorative. As we covered on Old School Shooters, you were recently in Vegas for the big John Jones fight, and it made me think of your impressions when you met Ari Emanuel and what you thought of him as a business person when you cross paths with him. Maybe you could tell the fans a little bit about that.
Sure. So I had the opportunity to go to a dinner that Ari was at. He's some attorneys that I was in Vegas with knew him, and folks at the time didn't really know his name, right? I didn't know it. And before we went to dinner, he was explained to me as the guy that the Entourage show was based on, right? And I had watched Entourage, and I didn't really know much about Endeavor. I knew the story, how they had purchased UFC, but I didn't know much about him. And in my brief interaction with him, he seemed like a really bright guy, and he is a professional wrestling fan. And he actually mentioned that because the UFC was out there, that he was more a fan of professional wrestling, which is so cool because now he's going to be there with Vince. I think this is an opportunity for them to perhaps put the genie back in the bottle where she belongs to some degree with professional wrestling, and it can benefit both companies, WWE and UFC. It's something that I'm really excited about.
Well, from a business perspective, the coverage that I've heard indicates that it's going to have an immediate bump, especially for the WWE in terms of increasing their stock price. So sounds like a win-win. And I did catch that interview with Mr. McMahon and was very impressed with Ari's content. You could tell that he was most definitely a fan.
Yeah, he's a fan. And, speaking of Vince, though, Vince is trying to steal my 2023 look with the stash. Looking kind of dastardly, Mr. McMahon. But Mr. McMahon, all I'll say to you, Vince McMahon, is mine is much bigger and much thicker.
Yeah, I would say he looks like a cross between Snidely Whiplash and Errol Flynn, but whatever. It's a fresh new approach for Mr. McMahon. So God bless him at his age. Have a fan question here that has come up quite a bit online from Maurice. He asks, how long do you think it is before we get the Conor McGregor show in WWE?
Oh man, that's Maurice Shortle? I think I just saw it on the screen. You got my prescriptions on here. Maurice Shortle from Ireland has a great show. I've had the pleasure of being a guest on his podcast. And
is that Pete podcast?
I'm not quite sure what he could, but his name is Maurice Shortle. He's an Irishman, and I was a special guest for him for St. Patrick's Day last year, and Hannibal's been on his platform as well. His platform was featured on Vice Network a couple times too. Yep. He's got a great platform, and he's a great guy, and man, that's just one of the many. Absolutely. There's no doubt you're going to see Conor McGregor in WWE, but there's going to be so much as far as co-promotional opportunities with this. It's going to be fantastic. And I'd love to see us work with Jake Shannon with the Shoot Pro Wrestling. Jake and I are going to be on Jerry Briscoe and Bradshaw's podcast coming up in a couple weeks. And, they've got the deep hooks in WWE. I'd love to see that. But this just opens up so many opportunities. It's an exciting time, to sit back and be a fan.
How would you, all that notwithstanding, how would you answer some of the, online, of course, there are a lot of individuals with a lot of opinions, and some are bemoaning the fact that this is, just how historic a moment this is in terms of the first time in history that Titan Sports or WWE, whatever you want to call it, is not directly run by, although Mr. McMahon is integrally involved, and I guess we'll be back in creative positions as well. But How do you feel about those that feel that it wouldn't be a net positive for WWE, that there's a larger management infrastructure than besides Vince?
Oh, that ship sailed long ago, brother. Ship sailed long ago. I've had conversations with our past guest on Old School Shooters, Jerry Briscoe, about that. I mean, WWE became a publicly traded company and became PCBS, for years. And, like I said, if had been Vince when they became publicly traded, I don't understand Vince at all, man. I mean, at his age when they became publicly traded, he was in his early 50s. He should have sailed off into the sunset and just come back periodically with a Mr. McMahon character. But, to each his own, man. I mean, the guy's obviously married to the company. But to any fan saying that, it's just I don't pay attention to what they say. Fan is short for fanatic, and there's a lot of ignorant buffoons out there with keyboards.
Yeah, personally, I think it because of the synergistic opportunities that you mentioned, it's going to be a net positive in terms of you've got MMA competitors that in the modern era have a sense of the showmanship aspect of the business of combat sports, perhaps having an easier path to transition to the WWE rather than, the efforts that have been made to recruit these college athletes or others that really have no combat sports background.
Oh, absolutely, man. I mean, it's a no-brainer. It's all combat sports. It's all pro wrestling at the end of the day, be it what you call MMA today or pro wrestling. So that's a natural, that's a given. And, I just want to kind of close this out just by telling folks now is the time to raise your combat sports IQ. Now is the time to educate yourself. I hate to have this sound like a commercial, but now is the time. If you don't own a copy, buy Rough and Tumble, because you don't have any idea how little you know until you read the book.
Absolutely. Well, King, we'll be keeping an eye on this as it develops in the weeks and months and years to come, and most certainly continue with just hats off to you in terms of creating the Old School Shooters podcast. We really see now how ahead of the curve that was in terms of you making those linkages between combat sports, MMA competitors, and pro wrestling, and raising the public IQ. So hopefully fans will go out there and grab your book.
Thank you, brother. It's all the same tree, and it's all old school. Everyone check out Old School Shooters. You'll have a great educational experience listening to that show as well. Jack, it is an absolute pleasure. I'm going to let you go. Exciting time to be a combat sports fan in America.
Indeed. Jack Kilby here, Executive Vice President of Great North Wrestling.
And Canada.
No Gimmicks Entertainment is pleased to present Great North Wrestling's huge 15th anniversary show on Saturday, May the 6th at the Earl Armstrong Arena in Ottawa, Ontario. Bell time 7 p.m. This stacked card will feature former TNA Impact World Heavyweight Champion Cowboy James Storm, WCW legend The Taskmaster Kevin Sullivan managing the diabolical Blood Hunter, second generation former TNA star Aces and Eights Wes Briscoe, Canadian champion Black Dynamite Jeremy Prophet, and former GNW Women's Champion Jessica Black, the Conspiracy Horsemen of Ayatollah Bin Hameen and Greek god Papadon from Vince Russo's brand, Ottawa wrestling legend Bruiser, with much more to be announced. Fans, there will be a meet and greet before the event and at intermission. Tickets now on sale, available at ticketweb.ca and at the door. Don't you dare miss it.